You know, we love to rank things. Best movies, greatest athletes, and yeah, especially our political leaders. It's kind of how we make sense of history. But when it comes to US presidents, the argument over who was the best, well, that's often overshadowed by an even fiercer debate. Who was the absolute worst? I mean, the one whose time in office represents the lowest of the low for the presidency. It's a question historians have been wrestling with for generations, and it turns out the answer tells us a whole lot about how we view presidential failure itself. You see, for over 100 years, historical surveys were pretty much all on the same page about who held that last place spot. It was a done deal. But that's all changed. Recently, that long-held consensus has been turned on its head, sparking a huge debate between two totally different eras and really two totally different kinds of presidencies. Okay, but how do we even get these rankings? Well, we're not talking about random opinion polls here. These lists come from serious surveys of historians and political scientists. I mean, the experts who spend their entire lives studying this stuff. They score presidents on everything from crisis leadership to moral authority. So let's take a look at the current landscape according to the 2024 Presidential Greatness Project. The top of the list? Rock solid. You've got Lincoln, FDR, Washington, the usual titans. But look at the bottom. That's where things get really interesting. For the first time, Donald Trump has been ranked dead last, number 45, sinking below the guy who held that unfortunate title for ages, James Buchanan. And that, right there, is where our story really kicks off. This shakeup at the bottom isn't just about shuffling names around. No. It signals a real debate among scholars about what the ultimate presidential failure even is. Is it doing nothing when disaster strikes, or is it doing things that actively challenge the system itself? So let's get into it. Let's really look at the two presidents now sitting at the bottom of this historical ranking. On one side, you have the president who watched the nation literally collapse into a civil war. And on the other, the president whose term sparked, as one source put it, credible fears about the future of democracy. So, meet our contenders. First, James Buchanan, the 15th president. For more than 150 years, he was the undisputed benchmark for failure. His legacy is completely tied to America's greatest crisis, the Civil War. His modern challenger is, of course, Donald Trump, the 45th president. And the critiques against him, well, they center on his challenges to democratic norms and institutions. And let's be really clear about how solid Buchanan's position was. As political scientists point out, he was the consensus choice. It wasn't even a debate. His name was basically synonymous with presidential failure. So what did he do? Or maybe more accurately, what did he not do to earn that reputation? Okay, so Buchanan, his failure, as historians see it, is a story of catastrophic inaction. He was staring down the single greatest threat in American history, and his response was, well, paralysis. This timeline shows you just how fast everything fell apart on his watch. In those 4 critical months between Lincoln's election and his inauguration, the country just dissolved. In what's called the secession winter, 7 states left the Union and formed the Confederacy. Federal property was being seized. And Buchanan? He did next to nothing to stop it. So why? Why did he just stand by? Well, his reasoning is really key here. Buchanan basically argued that, yeah, secession was illegal, but the Constitution gave him zero authority to use force to stop it. He was caught in a legal trap of his own making, completely unwilling to act as the country literally broke apart around him. And that is his legacy, summed up perfectly in this one devastating phrase from historical analysis. He was the man in charge who simply watched. For more than a century, this was the gold standard for presidential failure, abandoning your duty in a moment of absolute crisis. All right, now let's pivot to the modern challenger. If Buchanan's failure was all about inaction, the scholarly critique of Donald Trump is the exact opposite. It's a failure defined by action. Actions that experts say challenge the very foundations of the democratic system. When you look at the scholarly critiques, a few key things pop up again and again. They point to his rhetoric against institutions like the press and the courts. They point to his 2 impeachments. And, crucially, they point to his refusal to concede the 2020 election, which broke with one of America's oldest and most important traditions. He also consistently got the lowest marks from scholars on moral authority. And this quote from the Brennan Center for Justice really gets to the heart of why that last point is such a big deal for these scholars.
The peaceful transfer of power isn't just some nice custom, it's seen as the absolute bedrock of a lawful society. So, in their view, to challenge it is to challenge the whole system.
So there you have it. You've got Buchanan, slammed for his passivity and failing to hold the Union together, and then you have Trump, criticized for actions seen as actively undermining democratic norms. This isn't just about two guys. It's about two fundamentally different ways a presidency can be judged a failure. This actually brings us to a really helpful way of thinking about this whole debate. It's the difference between a sudden, explosive crisis and a slow, creeping decay. Okay, first up, constitutional crisis. Legal scholar Jack Balkin defines it as that moment of immediate danger, when politics is right on the edge of collapsing into violence or civil war. It's an explosion, an immediate threat to the system's survival.
But then there's this other idea, what's called constitutional rot. And this is totally different. It's not a sudden explosion. It's a slow decay. It's the gradual erosion of the unwritten rules, the trust in institutions, and that shared faith in the democratic process that kind of holds everything together.
And this is where it all clicks together. Buchanan's presidency ended in an undeniable constitutional crisis, the Civil War. The system broke down completely. The scholarly critiques of Trump, on the other hand, focus more on this idea of constitutional rot, that slower wearing away of norms and trust, a different but still profound threat to the health of a republic. So, you see, the whole debate about America's worst president has evolved. It's not just about a single catastrophic failure of inaction anymore. Now, it also includes the perceived danger of that slow erosion of democracy's foundations. It's become a debate about what we fear more, the sudden storm or the slow rising tide. Which leaves us with one last big question to think about. As we weigh these two very different kinds of failure, crisis versus rot, what does this whole argument really tell us about the vulnerabilities that democracies, not just in America, but all over the world, are facing right now in the 21st century?